Isn't it obvious? Starting today, we're going to live here. Families are supposed to help each other, right? My sister Megan said this as casually as if she were making small talk. I stood frozen in the doorway of my own home, staring in disbelief at what was unfolding in front of me. Behind Megan, my father Dan stood with his arms crossed, looking as if this were the most natural thing in the world. My mother Susan was soothing Megan's twin babies, even letting out a relieved sigh. Megan's husband Joey didn't even bother waiting for my response and was already trying to lift one of the mountains of cardboard boxes they had brought. At their feet, 10-year-old Alex, 7-year-old Emma, and 4-year-old Lucas were running wild. This was my house, the one sanctuary I had poured my entire life into securing. Did they take my silence as agreement? Or had they simply decided my opinion never mattered in the first place? Then my mother delivered the final blow. Words so unbelievable they sliced into me with cold, deliberate precision. Think about it, Hillary. This house is far too big for just one person. What a waste. Use it for your family. That's your role now that you're 32 and still single. That single sentence blasted away the fog of confusion clouding my brain. In its place, a hot, rising anger surged from deep within me. My life, my effort, my choices, all dismissed as nothing more than a convenient pawn, a cushion for their failures. And now they were shoving that reality right in front of me. The kids, oblivious to the tension among the adults, had already stormed inside the house. Alex was bouncing on my beloved sofa. Emma had grabbed the TV remote, blasting an anime at full volume. But I couldn't afford to explode. That would be exactly what they wanted. As a financial manager, I'd trained myself to stay calm and analyze numbers and facts with objectivity. That discipline was the only thing keeping me from losing control. I took a long, deep breath. Then, as steadily as I could, I said, "First, stop bringing your things into my house. And then tell me, step by step, what exactly happened? Because I have never once heard anything about you moving in." For a moment, my mother looked genuinely startled, but she recovered quickly, slipping back into her usual tone. "There's nothing to explain. You already knew Megan and her family were struggling, didn't you?" That sentence cracked open memories I had kept buried. I knew my sister had thrown herself into her so-called difficult situation. I remembered the day that reckless plan began. How I warned them over and over again, and how not a single one of them listened. It all started one Sunday afternoon, a year ago. We had gathered in the dining room of the house Megan had inherited from our grandmother. Grandma had left the house to her because, unlike me, who was already independent, Megan was married with children. She wanted to give her a stable foundation for the future. Megan had invited the entire family, saying she had an important announcement. "Listen, everyone, we're finally going to make our dream come true." With a bright, excited voice, Megan spread a proposal across the center of the table. On the cover of the proposal, the words "Natural Glow" were printed. It was the name of the organic cosmetics online shop the two of them planned to launch. "This isn't just any skincare line. These are real organic products, 100% pure ingredients that are good for both the earth and your skin," Joey said, his voice full of fervor. According to them, consumers were fed up with chemical-filled products saturating the market and were desperate for their authentic alternative. "That's wonderful. That's my girl," my father exclaimed without hesitation. "What a beautiful dream," my mother said, sounding genuinely moved. But I, out of habit as a financial manager, stepped back mentally and observed their excitement with a touch of caution. Having dreams is wonderful, but a business cannot be built on dreams alone. I quietly reached for the proposal, and after flipping just a few pages, I found the first and biggest red flag. Under the funding section, they had written, as if it were nothing, "Funds, sell Grandma's house. The house our grandmother cherished and lived in until the day she passed. The one she left to Megan, filled with all our memories." And they wanted to use it as the first stake in this wildly optimistic fantasy they called a business plan. A chill ran through me. "Wait, Megan, you're not serious, right? You're going to sell the house? That house is something Grandma left you because she wanted it to be your foundation. It's full of our memories." At my anguished words, Megan sighed with a look of pure exasperation. "Oh, Hillary, you're doing it again. You're too sentimental. Memories don't put food on the table. This is an investment in our future. Grandma would be happier knowing I used the house to follow my dreams instead of clinging to it. Joey nodded, talking to me as if I were a clueless child. She's right. Clinging to an old house is such an outdated mindset, Hillary. We're looking at a much bigger future. You should try broadening your horizons. Yes, exactly, my mother chimed in, raising her voice as if shielding Megan. What matters is the dream ahead, not the past. Support your sister's big challenge. I was speechless. Appealing to emotion was useless. I forced the anger and sorrow swelling inside me deep down. I closed my eyes tightly, then opened them again, putting on my professional mask, the calm face of a financial manager. Fine. In that case, let me ask a few questions, from a business standpoint. I spoke as gently as I could. First, about this pricing. Your flagship product, the beauty serum, its cost is nearly $50 per bottle, right? And you're planning to sell it for $60. Is that correct? Megan beamed proudly. Of course. We're using the highest quality organic oils from around the world. Naturally, the cost is high, but for this level of quality, $60 is practically a bargain. I steadied myself, fighting the urge to rub my temples. Megan, a business can't survive on that. From that $10 margin, you two have to cover website maintenance, marketing, shipping, packaging, and most importantly, your own living expenses. Have you calculated any of that? At this price, the more you sell, the deeper you go into the red. Even if you sell out your entire first batch of inventory, you might not even have enough left to pay for the next round of supplies. This was the most fatal flaw in their plan. They were intoxicated by the phrase, the best ingredients, completely ignoring the core fundamentals of business, cost analysis and profit structure. At my remark, Megan's smile vanished. What are you talking about? Hillary, you don't get it. This isn't just a product, it's a work of art. Joey backed her up immediately. That's right. Hillary just doesn't understand our passion. All she ever talks about is numbers. No vision, no dreams. And then, as always, my parents delivered the final blow. Hillary, that's enough, my father said, sounding disappointed. Stop pouring cold water on your sister's dream. You've always been like this. Too realistic, never thinking about other people's feelings. My mother, getting teary-eyed, added, We want to support Megan's challenge with all our hearts. We're family, aren't we? So what if she fails? Families are supposed to lift each other up. At that point, I had no words left. It was painfully clear that they didn't want realistic advice, only irresponsible praise. They had sealed themselves inside a world built from pleasant fantasies, refusing to let any inconvenient truth reach them. It was obvious their grand vision was nothing more than a castle made of sand, and when that castle finally collapsed, I already knew exactly who they would run to for help. Sadly, that uneasy premonition became a harsh reality, right here on my doorstep, exactly 1 year later. Pulled out of my memories and thrust back into the chaos unfolding in front of my house, my mother's shrill voice stabbed into my ears. Are you listening, Hillary? You know how hard things have been for Megan and her family, don't you? They worked so hard after that. I had to fight the urge to laugh out of sheer disbelief. Their hard work had resulted in losing our grandmother's cherished home, accumulating $200,000 in debt, and now barging into my house. Shaking off the despair that had clung to me since that day a year ago, I spoke clearly and firmly. Absolutely not. Every ounce of my will was poured into those words. I refuse. Megan and her family will not be living in my home. Not now. Not ever. At that clear refusal, everyone present froze in place. They stared at me, stunned, as if the concept of me rejecting them had never once existed in their reality. The first to recover was Megan. That's horrible, Hillary. How can you be so cold? Are you saying you don't care if we end up on the streets? That these children, your own niece and nephews, don't have a place to sleep tonight? She hugged her twins in an exaggerated display, using them as shields, the lowest, most manipulative tactic. Beside her, Joey trembled with anger. I can't believe this. I had no idea my sister-in-law was such a heartless person. We're only asking for help. My mother shrieked, Abandoning your own family is unforgivable. Take that back right now. My father added heavily, Your success is thanks to the support of this family. Is this how you repay us? I'm disappointed in you, Hillary. The words came like knives. Cold-hearted, ungrateful, selfish, thrown one after another. I stood silently, letting their verbal assault wash over me. It wasn't anger that filled me anymore. It was a deep, bottomless sorrow. They would never, not even now, admit their mistakes. I inhaled slowly, deeply. I understand how you feel, but my answer is the same. This is my house, not a shelter for you to run to. Pack your things and leave. Before they could respond, I guided the children out into the yard to play, getting them safely outside. Then I turned back toward the adults, reached for the front door, and pushed my father's resisting hand away as I slammed it shut with all my strength. A metallic clank echoed as I locked it. From the other side, I heard shouting, crying, pounding, but I pressed my hands over my ears and collapsed onto the living room sofa. That night, I called a locksmith and had every lock in the house changed first thing the next morning. Now they couldn't get in. I finally felt, for the first time, a fragile sense of relief. A boundary had been drawn. But in just a few days, I would learn how fragile that sense of safety truly was. That day, I finished work a little earlier than usual and headed home. As I approached my house, I noticed something off. The front door was slightly open. All the blood drained from my face. The door I locked, the locks I changed. My hands trembled as I pushed it open. The moment I stepped into the living room, my breath caught in my throat. The floor was buried in the same overwhelming mountain of cardboard boxes and suitcases I had seen days earlier. And from the kitchen, my sister Megan appeared with a calm, almost cheerful expression. "Oh, Hillary, welcome home." "Why?" The words barely formed. "How did you get in?" With zero shame, Megan answered, "I asked Mom to call an old friend of Dad's. He's a locksmith. She told him her daughter was locked out and crying because she lost her keys, so he opened the door right away. And he made us new spare keys, too." Such a lifesaver. This wasn't a family dispute anymore. It was a clear criminal act. From upstairs, I heard the children laughing and shouting. Drawn by dread, I walked up the stairs and opened the door to my study. It was no longer my study. The walls were smeared with messy swaths of pink and blue paint, and cute animal stickers were plastered everywhere. The expensive reference books and files I had carefully collected for work were stacked haphazardly on the floor, buried under piles of children's toys. And at the center of the room stood a bunk bed and a tiny crib, placed there as if they had every right in the world. My sanctuary had been transformed, without my permission, into a perfect children's bedroom. "What have you done?" As I returned to the living room in shock, Megan's voice came from behind me. "I'm sorry, Hillary, but the kids needed their own room, you know? It's not like you used that room for anything other than work." Rage washed over me, darkening my vision for a moment. I spun around and shouted, "Get out, all of you! Get out of my house, now!" Just then, Joey came in from the front door, stepping directly between me and the exit. "That's not happening. We don't have anywhere else to go." And right on cue, Megan burst into tears again. "Please, Hillary, don't do this. You can't throw us out. Do you really want these children out on the streets?" Her sobs echoed through the open doorway, spilling out into the neighborhood. I caught the silhouettes of neighbors peeking through their windows, watching. Megan immediately seized the opportunity. "Everyone, please listen. My own sister is trying to throw my small children out of the house." Then she began calling our mother over and over, crying dramatically into the phone. "Hillary kicked us out. She threw out our whole family. The kids will have nowhere to go tonight." Once my mother heard Megan's version of events, she spread it even further. Within hours, my phone began lighting up relentlessly with messages and calls from aunts and cousins. "How could you do something so cruel? Your poor mother is devastated. She might collapse from the stress." They swallowed Megan and my mother's one-sided story whole, eagerly casting me as the cold-hearted villain. No one wanted the truth. No one listened, even when I explained calmly and logically. Against the emotional narrative of the poor, suffering little sister, logic stood no chance. Anyone else might have broken at this point, but instead I came to a decision. If I acted on emotion, I would lose. If I played the hysterical older sister, I would be giving them exactly what they wanted. So I had to do the opposite. The next morning, I deliberately put on an exhausted, defeated expression. In a trembling voice, I spoke to Megan and Joey. All right, I understand. I was wrong. For a moment, the living room fell silent. They seemed unsure how to interpret my words. You're right. Families should help each other. If it's only temporary, you can stay here. I'm sorry. At my declaration of surrender, their faces lit up instantly. They truly believed it. They believed I had finally broken, that their pressure had won. Really? Hillary, thank you. Megan ran up to hug me. I allowed it, keeping my expression hollow and lifeless. They didn't realize what was actually happening. This wasn't surrender. It was a silent declaration of war. I pretended to allow them to live with me, while quietly advancing my plan behind the scenes. My plan was simple. I would get rid of the battlefield altogether by selling the house. After all, I hadn't purchased this house solely as a place to live. I had also bought it as a long-term real estate investment. And fortunately, development in the area over the past few years had driven property values far above what I paid for it. This house was no longer a place of peace. So if it had become nothing more than an asset, then now, at its peak value, was the perfect time to sell. Rather than fighting on the battlefield, I would simply obliterate the battlefield itself. That was the ultimate solution I reached. From that day on, I began living a double life. Inside the house, I played the part of the understanding older sister. When they broke house rules or used my belongings without permission, I simply forced a weak smile and said, "It's fine. Don't worry." They relaxed completely, convinced I had submitted. But the moment I stepped outside the house, I became a ruthless investor and the executor of my plan. Beneath the surface, a massive current had begun to swirl. My double life lasted for nearly 2 months. And during that time, their foolishness knew no limits. My quiet study had been completely transformed into the children's playground, and the living room had become Joey's personal gaming room. And I accepted all of it. Every intrusion, every violation. The more they let their guard down, the more smoothly my plan progressed. The real estate agent I had hired was remarkably competent. He assessed the value of my house with precision and discreetly began listing potential buyers through his private network for affluent clients. Showings were scheduled during the few hours I managed to lure Megan and her family out of the house by calling it a weekend picnic. Of course, they had no idea that those picnics were nothing more than a tactic to buy me time, a step toward deciding their fate. Then, on the afternoon of the 68th day since my plan began, my phone vibrated quietly. A short message from the agent. "We found a buyer. The offer exceeds your expected price. Shall we proceed with the contract?" I took a deep breath and replied with a short reply. "Yes, please." From that moment on, everything moved with astonishing speed. I signed the sales contract. The buyer wired the payment, and finally, the ownership of the house was legally transferred from me to the new owner. The house was no longer mine. And then came the day of reckoning. Friday, 5 p.m. When I returned home, everyone was already gathered in the living room. A few days earlier, I had informed my parents, "We need to talk about the future of the family. You must come to the house." They were convinced, absolutely certain, that I wanted to negotiate the terms for formally accepting Megan's family as permanent residents. My sister's family was as loud as ever, laughing at the TV, and my parents sat on the sofa with hopeful, expectant expressions. "Welcome home, Hillary," my mother said. At the exact moment I took off my coat, the doorbell rang. Joey sighed dramatically and dragged himself to the door. Standing outside was a sharp-eyed man in an expensive suit. It was Ben Irving, the attorney I had hired. "Good evening, I am Ben Irving, attorney for Miss Hillary Anderson, Mr. Dan Anderson, Miss Susan Anderson, Miss Megan Watson, and Mr. Joey Watson. You are all present, I assume." At the emotionless tone of his voice, the laughter in the living room stopped instantly. My father stood up frowning and walked toward the entrance. "Hillary's lawyer? What is this about?" Irving remained completely unfazed by my father's intimidating posture. He opened his briefcase and took out a document. "I'll be direct. My client, Miss Hillary Anderson, sold this property 3 days ago to a Mr. Gale. The transfer of ownership was officially completed earlier today." He raised his voice slightly so that everyone in the living room could hear clearly. "You are currently occupying Mr. Gale's property without any legal right to do so. This is your formal eviction notice. You are required to vacate the premises and remove all of your belongings within 72 hours by Monday at 5 p.m. Everyone in the room froze. What? What are you talking about? My father snatched the documents from the lawyer's hand, his voice trembling. As he scanned the page, the law firm's logo, the formal and indisputable wording, his face twisted with despair. If you fail to vacate the premises by the deadline, Ben continued, his tone cold and unwavering, the new owner, Mr. Gale, will file for immediate court-ordered eviction. In that case, the record will remain on your credit history. I advise you to make a wise decision. With that, Ben gave me a brief nod, said, "Excuse me," and quietly took his leave. The sound of the door closing echoed through the living room. And then, like a dam bursting, chaos exploded around me. "Hillary, what the hell is this? Explain yourself." My father's roar shook the entire house. No, Hillary, tell me this isn't true. Our house sold?" Megan grabbed my arm, sobbing hysterically. My mother collapsed to the floor, wailing, "You're abandoning Megan's family?" But none of their words reached me anymore. Slowly, I unwrapped Megan's fingers from my arm, looked at each of them, stunned, enraged, disbelieving, and spoke clearly. "My house. My decision. This is the line between you and me." My words poured into the inferno of their confusion and fury. For a moment, a silence as if time had stopped dominated the living room. And the next instant, my father's furious roar, like nothing I had ever heard, shook the walls of the house. "Don't mess with me." He kicked the low table across the room. My mother slumped to the floor, muttering, "What kind of daughter? She's a devil." Megan screamed, cursing me through her tears. "My kids will be homeless because of you." Joey punched the wall, shaking with rage. And yet, my heart was perfectly still. Their words no longer pierced anything inside me. I turned away from them, walked upstairs, and picked up the single suitcase I had packed in advance. Then, passing through the chaos around me, I quietly opened the front door and stepped outside, without looking back even once. That house was no longer mine. I walked straight to the hotel I had booked and turned off my phone. For the next 72 hours, I spoke to no one. I slept. I read. And I thought about the life I would build from here on. No matter how much they screamed, cursed, or begged, it no longer mattered. They were no longer negotiating with me. Monday, a little after 5 p.m., a short message from Ben confirmed everything. Eviction confirmed as of 17 o'clock today. I later learned what happened. They had barricaded themselves in the house until early Monday afternoon, doing absolutely nothing, probably clinging to the delusion that I would come crawling back out of guilt or that this entire situation was some twisted joke. But when Ben returned at 4 p.m. with 2 police officers, they finally realized it was over. They packed in hysterics, shoved the screaming children into their minivan, and fled the house at the very last minute. A few days later, I asked Ben to file for a restraining order in family court. It was the final, and most necessary, boundary to protect my workplace and my new residence. Given everything that had happened, the court approved it quickly. About a month after the incident, I received a phone call from my aunt, the same aunt who had once called me heartless. To my surprise, her voice carried an apology. She explained that Megan's family, with nowhere else to go, had moved into my parents' tiny old house. With no privacy, financial strain, and constant bickering, the household had become a battlefield. Megan and my mother complained nonstop, made endless demands, and exhausted everyone around them. And soon, people began to notice the contradictions in their story. At last, the truth surfaced. They finally understood the reality I had endured, and that my decision had been the last, necessary act of self-preservation. After that call, apologies began to trickle in from other relatives as well. I accepted their words quietly and answered only, "It's over now." I didn't feel anger, nor forgiveness, just closure. It was enough that the truth had finally returned to where it belonged. Now, I live in a bright, sunlit apartment high above the city. The profit from selling the house far exceeded what I'd expected, a testament to my years of hard work and to the painful but correct choices I made during that nightmare. I lost my family, but what I truly lost was the chain of blood that had tried to bind me, the people who sought to exploit my life for their own comfort. And in their place, I gained something far more valuable: control over my own life, and a peace of mind no one can take away from me.